Good day, students. Once again, this is another video on the allocation of joint cost using the physical method, and also the allocation of joint cost using the net realizable value method. Then obviously I will not limit my teaching only to those. I will also respond to the question of calculating the cost per unit, joint cost per unit, further processing cost per unit, total cost per unit, also calculating gross profit and net profit. And some of these are part of the requirements. Now we are required just to go to our requirements first. We are required to allocate our joint costs to the joint products by using physical unit method, and also calculating the gross profit for each of the joint products. Then I will also go further to calculate the net profit, not only the gross profit, and also calculate other things that are also necessary in the calculation of the gross profit, and explain also other dimensions. Further, we are required to allocate our joint costs to the joint products using the net realizable value method. So now these are the two short requirements that we are required to respond to in the topic of joint cost. It says Ashwell Ltd manufactures the product X, Y, and Z. So they are producing or manufacturing these three products X, Y, and Z in a common process from a common raw material. So there's only one process where all the raw material go through this process, and product X and product X and Y are joint products, meaning they are costs that are incurred jointly to produce this product X and product Y. Then when we speak of joint cost, we know that these are the costs that are incurred jointly at the beginning of the certain stage. Then after, they are split into becoming product X and product Y, but in the beginning stage all the material and all the ingredients were mixed together. Then now this product will have to be split to become two different products, product X and Y. And there's also product Z, which is not an intentional product, and we call it incidental product, and that is called a byproduct, a product that we don't intend to produce, but during the production process it gets to be produced without intentions. The following information applies to the products that they have product X, product Y, and the byproduct Z, which is incidental product. We are given the units that were sold: 15,000, 10,000, and 1,500 for the byproduct. We are given opening units for the three products, and we are given opening inventory value. This was in units. Now this is the value of the opening inventory: 162,000 and 43,400. We are given units that were there at the end of the period, which is the current period. Take note, for the byproduct there is no inventory that is left, meaning we sold everything that we had during this period with regards to the byproduct. Now we are given joint costs and our joint cost, we have the total amount of joint cost which is not allocated per product. Why? Because we still need to allocate the amount of the joint cost using our physical method, and also using our net realizable value method. That is why now the joint costs are not allocated to each product, but they are given as total one amount. We have our further processing cost, which is 288,000, 180,000, and 15,000 for the byproduct. We also have other expenses, which is marketing expense: 30,000, 36,000, and 3,000 for the byproduct. Now we are further told that the selling price per unit after further processing our three products, it is 60 rand 40 rand and 16 rand. So now these are the selling prices after this product are further processed. That means further processing costs were incurred, and after they were incurred, then the selling price became 60 rand, 40 rand and 16 rand for each of the three products X, Y and Z respectively. Now let us then respond to the first requirement of allocating our joint cost using the physical method, and then after calculating the gross profit for each of the products that we have, obviously excluding the byproducts. We normally don't calculate gross profit for the byproduct because it is just an incidental product, a product that we manufacture without intending to do so. Now first thing we do, we need to highlight something that is very important that I did not read, that says the byproduct is accounted for on the reversal cost method. That means the income received on the sale of the byproduct, which is the 16 rand, multiply this by the number of units sold, then after minus further processing cost, then after minus the marketing expense, it will give us the revenue on the sale of the byproduct. Then we take that revenue, we deduct it from our joint cost before they are allocated. So now that's what it means when it says the byproduct is accounted for on the reversal cost method. We must take the revenue from the sale of this byproduct and we reduce our joint cost. Then after we'll have our adjusted joint cost, meaning joint cost after they've been adjusted by the revenue from the sale of this byproduct. This is quite important, but it's the common method in which joint cost is accounted for, unless it will be specified very well. There are four ways to account for the byproduct income. Now it says the company is using first in first out method of inventory valuation, which means the inventory that was there at the beginning of the period, the company will first sell that inventory. Then after start selling the one that was produced during the period. Then after whatever closing inventory it means it is the inventory that was produced during the current period. And that is touched base very much in the process costing topic. Now we need to calculate our revenue from the sale of the byproduct first, before we can allocate our joint cost using the physical method. Then you say now revenue from the sale of the byproduct, revenue from sale of byproduct. We look for this revenue from the sale of the byproduct. We have our sales where we sold 1,500 units of the byproduct. We sold 1,500 units of the byproduct, units sold. And the selling price of our byproduct, it is 16 rand. Then we look for the selling price after further processing cost, it was 16 rand. Then now we say our revenue will be 16 by 1,500, we get 24,000. Then we say less further processing cost. Our further processing costs are given to us for the byproduct. Our further processing cost of the byproduct, it is 15,000. Then after marketing cost of 3,000. So we minus our further processing cost. Then after we less our marketing cost. Then after we'll get to the net income from the sale of the byproduct, less 3,000 rands. Now our net income from the sale of the byproduct will be the net of the two, minus 15,000 minus 3,000. Then our net income from the sale of the byproduct, it is an amount of 6,000 rands. This should be 1 mark or 2 marks, depending to the person who was examining the paper and allocating marks. Then now we need to calculate adjusted joint cost, meaning joint cost after they've been adjusted by the income from the sale of the byproduct. Then now we calculate our adjusted joint cost. Then adjusted joint cost will be joint cost in total, which is 456,000 rands, if I still remember, minus 6,000 rands, which is the revenue from the sale of the byproduct. This will give us 450,000 rands. Now our joint cost total amount was 456,000. We minus the net income from the sale of the byproduct, which is 6,000, and this gives us a total of 450,000 rands. 450,000 is our adjusted joint cost, meaning now when we allocate our joint cost, we will be allocating the 450,000 rands, no longer the 456,000 rands, because that was before the revenue from the sale of the byproduct was taken into consideration. Now we need to then allocate our joint cost using the physical unit method. Now, physical unit method says that we must allocate our joint cost of 450,000 rands based on the number of units that were produced. And we don't have the number of units that were produced. Here we only have sales, opening and closing only. We don't have the number of units that were produced, meaning we still need to calculate units that were produced. So now let us calculate units that were produced. So now we say production of product X. We start with product X. I'll just use a different formula today. We're calculating the number of units that were produced. Now we know that we have a kind of a formula that says opening plus production. I just want to use this format today, minus sales is equal to closing. I just want to put it today in the equation so that we see it very clearly, because sometimes when you are required to calculate the missing units that are in the middle, it's sometimes difficult to change the sign, but if it's in the equation it becomes very simple. Opening inventory for product X, we have it as 4,500 units. So now we go and we paste the 4,500 units of the opening of product X plus production. Production, it is the number of units that we are looking for, so we still leave production as it is. Sales, it is 15,000, and closing, we have our closing. Closing, it is 3.5. Units sold, it is 15,000. Closing is 3.5 for product X. So now we say is equal to 3,500. What are we looking for? We're looking for the production, meaning the units produced in the current period for product X. So now we have to say production as the subject of the formula. This 4,000 will go over the equal sign. Therefore, now when it goes over the equal sign, then it will be negative. Meaning now we will have to say 3,500 plus 15,000 minus 4,500. Now that means we have to cross the 15,000 over the equal sign and also the 4,000. The 15,000 was negative, then when it goes over the equal sign, then it becomes negative. It becomes positive. But the 4.5 was positive. When it goes over the equal sign, then it becomes negative. So now we're calculating now our units that were produced for product X. 3,500 plus 15,000 minus 4,500. Then this gives us 14,000 units, meaning there were 14,000 units that were manufactured. Now at the same time, you can use another slight different approach when it comes to this, but you still get to the same figures. You can still not say minus sales, you can say minus closing is equal to sales, or some students prefer to say minus closing. Minus closing is equal to sales. So even if you use that approach, you still get to the same figures. Opening, it is 4,500. Production is what we are looking for. Minus closing, which is 3,500. and our sales being 15,000. Then now we are looking for the production. Therefore, now units that were produced will be equal to 15,000, which is already over the equal sign. We take 4,000 over the equal sign, it becomes negative 4.5. 3.5, it becomes positive 3.5. So now we still get to the same 15,000 minus 3,005 or minus 4.5 plus 3,500. We still get to the same 14,000 units that were manufactured for product X. So now this is the approach I'm taking today to calculate the missing units. Whatever could be missing, it could be sales, it could be closing, it could be opening. So use the same formula, you'll see how easy it will be. Then now we're calculating production, meaning the units that were produced for product Y. For product Y, then we use the same strategy where we say opening plus production minus closing is equal to sales. Then our opening units for product Y, it is a total of 1,400 units. That is our opening inventory. It is the opening units 1,400 for product Y. 1,400 plus production that we're looking for minus closing. Our closing is 3,200 units. We are looking for the units. 3,200 is equal to our sales. Our sales, it is 10,500 units that were sold for product Y. It is 10,500. So now we are looking for production, and we make production the subject of the formula, equals 10,500 plus 3,200 minus 1,400. Let us see now how much is our total units that were produced during the period. 10,500 minus 1,400 plus 3,200, it gives us 12,300 units. This is 12.3. This looks like an R, but it's a 12,300 units that were produced for product Y. So now we have calculated our production for both of the products. Now after we are done with that, let us look at what are we required to do. Allocate our joint cost using physical units, meaning the number of units that were produced during the period, not the one that were sold. So now let us allocate our joint cost using the physical units. Allocating joint cost. Then we start with the first product, which is product X. Now product X, we had 14 units that were produced. Divide this by the total units, 12,300 plus 14,000, meaning all the units that were produced by the two products, 26,300. Then we multiply this by the joint costs that were adjusted by the revenue from the sale of the byproduct. Then we say 14,000 divided by 26,300. We multiply this by 450,000 rands. We get the amount of the joint cost that must be allocated to product X as 239,454. This is our total joint cost. I prefer also to calculate joint cost per unit because this is the total joint cost for product X. This is total joint cost. Then now we calculate our joint cost per unit. Joint cost per unit will be total joint cost divided by the number of units that were manufactured, which becomes 17 Rand 11 cents. This might be required. Divide this by 14,000. After dividing this by 14,000 units that were manufactured, you get to your joint cost per unit. with regards to product X. This is where we are focusing. Then after we allocate our joint cost to the next product, which is product Y. Product Y allocation of joint cost will be equal to the number of units that were produced for product Y, which is 12,300 as we calculated previously. Then we divide by the total units, which is 26,300 units for X and Y, multiply this by the joint costs that have been adjusted by the revenue from the sale of the byproduct. Then now we say 12,300 plus, or 12,300 divide this by 26,300, multiply this by 450,000, we get 210,456, 210,456. So now this is our joint cost that have been allocated. We divide this by 12,300 in order for us to get to joint cost per unit. Joint cost per unit in terms of product Y. We divide this by 12,300, we get to the same as 17 rand 11 cents, and you can see that our joint cost per unit remain the same. Probably I don't know what could be the reason, but most of the times they are normally the same amount. I've been testing this most of the questions when I'm teaching in class, but there are a few times where I do it in the video, but most of the times they are normally the same amount. Now we go to the next part that I also want to explain, where now we have our requirement, which is to calculate our joint cost using the physical method. So we have responded to that. Then now what do we need to do is to calculate now our gross profit. And before I do that, I just want to calculate the total production cost for both products. I just want to calculate production cost for both products, which is product X and product Y. Now our production cost is made of joint cost, please know that, and further processing cost. Our joint cost, which we know that our joint cost, it is 239,000. It is 239,455, 454, 454. Let me just verify this. I think it was 544. We have 14,000 divided by 26,300, multiply this by 450,000, 239,544. Yes, 239,544. 239,544. 544. Then we have 239,544, and here we have 210,000 as our joint cost, 456 to 10,456. Our further processing cost, we have 288,000 here, and we have 180,000 here. Now that is 288 further processing cost and 180,000 for product Y, meaning our total cost of production for product S and Y, it will be 239,544 plus 288,000. Then we have 268,344. Repeat that, 239,544 plus 288,000. We get, yes, different figure. 527,000 is the correct figure. 527,544. Total cost is 210,456 plus 180,000. We get 390,000 456 for product Y. This will be our total cost. Now that we have our total cost, we also need to know how to calculate our cost per unit. We need to know how to calculate our cost per unit. Cost per unit will be total cost, divide this by the number of units that were manufactured, and total cost, divide this by the number of units that were manufactured. That is why we are calculating this total cost. Divide this by 12,300. We get 31 rand 74 cents, and 527,544 divide by 14,000. This will be a total of 37 rand 68 cents. This will be our now total cost per unit. At the same time, we know that total cost is made of joint cost plus further processing cost, which therefore means at the same time we could have calculated our further processing cost per unit, where we say the 288,000 divide this by 14,000, and we say 180,000 divide this by 12,300. Therefore now whatever figure we'll get, let me just verify that for you. We could have said 288,000 divided by 14,000 units. We get 20 rand 57 cents, which is further processing cost per unit, plus the joint cost per unit of product X, plus 17 rand 10 cents. We get the same 37 rand 68, which is 67 just due to rounding off. So now that could give us the same answer, to be honest, even if we calculated further processing cost per unit and we add it to the joint cost per unit. It was still going to give us the same cost per unit. Now we have calculated that. Then let's go now to our gross profit. We are calculating gross profit, responding now to the requirement that we're required to do. Requirement was to also to calculate the gross profit for each of the product. Now calculating gross profit is very easy. We say sales, and it will be sales for the two products. First of all, product X and product Y. We need to calculate our sales, and our sales, it was 60 by 15,000. For the second product, it was 40 by 10,500. Then 60 rand was the selling price, 15,000 was the number of units. Then this gives us 900,000 rands, and 40 rand by 10,500, it gives us 420,000. These were our sales in total, which is sales revenue after we've multiplied. We had 15,000 units sold and 10,500 units sold at a price of 60 rand and at a price of 40 rand for product Y. So that's why we multiply by 60 rand and 40 rand. Now we need to say less cost of sales. Less cost of sales. Our cost of sales is made of the opening inventory, and our opening inventory, we are already given the cost or the value of the opening inventory. Here it was 162,000, and here it was 43,400. Let me just verify that. 43,400. Yes, our opening inventory value was 162,000, and 43,400 is already given in rands to us. We don't have to bother ourselves with any other calculations. Then after we say production. Now our production, I've already calculated the total cost of production, and our production cost in total is 527,544. 527,544. It is 527,544. And here we calculated 210,456. Hope that is correct to my memory. Okay, sorry, it is 390,456, 390,456, 390,456, 390,456. Then we less our closing. Our closing inventory will be at the cost of production per unit of the current year. Our cost per unit is 37.68 rand for product X. So we say 37.68 rand, 37.68 rand, 37.68 by the number of units that were left at the end of the year, and I think it was 3,500 for product X, which is the units that were there at the end. Closing inventory 3.5 units, and the cost of production, meaning the cost per unit, we calculated it very accurately to be 37 rand 68 cents. Then for the second one, we had a different cost per unit as 31 rand 74 cents, 31 rand 74 cents, 31 rand 74 cents by the number of units that were there at the end of the period, of which our closing inventory we calculated, or it was given as 3,200 units. There we do have it. So we multiply by the cost of production during the current period. So now that will be, or this will be our closing inventory. Then we say 37.68 by 3,500. We get closing inventory as 131,880. Then we have 31.74 by 3,200. We get closing inventory as 101,568. Then this will give us the cost of sales then after we calculate our gross profit. So we can draw the line there and draw the line there in calculating our cost of sales. Then we say opening 162,000 plus production 527,544 minus closing 131,880. Then we get to the cost of sales as 557,664 negative. Then after we then calculate the cost of sales for product Y, 43,400 plus 390,456 minus closing of 101,568, we get 332,288. 332,288. Then after we say minus 420,000 to get to our gross profit, which is 87,712, and gross profit here will be 900,000 minus 557,664, we get 342,336. So this is the response to the first requirement to calculate our gross profit. So now we can also say less marketing cost. Our marketing cost, it was given as 30,000 here and 36,000 here. Remember, this is not required, but when you're required to calculate the net profit, you'll have to deduct the non-production cost. Then this will be minus 30,000. Then we get to 312,336. That will be the net profit for product X. Product Y, it will be 877,712 minus 36,000. Then we get to 51,712. This will be the net profit if you will be required to calculate the net profit. Now this is where the first requirement is ending and I've alluded to most of the very important items. that are here. We calculated the joint cost per unit, and one thing that I said is very important is the calculation of the further processing cost per unit. Very important to know how to calculate your further processing cost per unit. This is in total, so it's very important to do so that you can just verify your cost per unit, if the cost per unit is really calculated accurately or correctly. So I've also alluded on that as I'm erasing some of the writing that I've done. Now let's go to the next requirement, where now we are required to allocate our joint cost using the net realizable value method. Calculate our joint cost using the net realizable value method. Now, using the net realizable value method, remember our joint costs have already been adjusted by the revenue from the sale of the byproduct. So now we know that we must calculate our net realizable value for each product, meaning we need NRV, net realizable value, for product X and for product Y, where we start with the sales, and our sales are calculated from the number of units that were manufactured, not the one that were sold. Whenever we're allocating joint cost, we calculate our hypothetical sales value, meaning assuming all the units that were manufactured were all sold. Then 40 Rand by 12,300 units that were manufactured for product X. For Y, in fact, by 14,000, we get 840,000. For product Y, we have 40 Rand by 12,300. We get 492,000. 492,000. Then after, we need to deduct our further processing cost, less further processing cost, and our further processing cost, it is 288,000 and 180,000. They are given to us. It is a matter of copy and paste. A matter of copy and paste. Further processing cost amount to 288,000 and 180,000 for product X and Y. Therefore, now after this will give us net realizable value for each of these products. Net realizable value being the difference, 492 minus 180,000. Minus 180,000, we get our NRV as 312,000. And for product Y, it is 840,000 minus 288,000. We get 552,000. So now this is our net realizable value. Then we calculate our total NRV, our total net realizable value amount, which is equal to the sum of the two, plus 312,000. It gives us 864,000. We get 864,000. Therefore, now we can say joint cost, or allocate joint cost now. Now we can allocate our joint cost to our products, which is product X. How do we do that? We say net realizable value for product X, 552,000, divide this by the total NRV, 864,000, and we multiply this by the joint cost of 450,000 after they were adjusted by the revenue from the sale of the byproduct. Then we have 552,000 divided by 864,000, multiply this by 450,000. We get an amount of 287,500. Then we allocate our joint cost to the next product, which is product Y. Then we go to product Y. Product Y, it will be 312,000, which is net realizable value for product Y. There is the net realizable value, which is NRV. We divide it by the total NRV, and our total net realizable value, it is 864,000, and we multiply this by the adjusted joint cost after the revenue from the sale of the byproduct was adjusted. 312,000 divided by 864,000, multiply this by 450,000. Just recalculate. 312,000 divided by 864,000, multiply this by 450,000, we get 162,500, 499.99, 162,500. That is rounded off figure. 162,499.99 will be 500. So it's 162,500. And in this one, we are not required to calculate our gross profit. But I just want to calculate now what we call total cost per unit. I just want to calculate total cost per unit. Total cost per unit. Now we are calculating the total cost per unit after the joint costs have been allocated using the net realizable value method. How to calculate the total cost per unit? Your total cost per unit will be your total cost. Now our total cost per unit will be made of the total cost first. We need to know the total cost that is made of joint cost for product X and for product Y. And we look for the joint cost for this product. 287,500, 287,500, and 162,500. Then we have our further processing cost, which don't change, is 288,000 and 180,000. And from here we get to our total production cost. We say 162,500 plus 180,000. We get an amount of 342,500. Here we have 288,000. 288 plus 287,500. It is 575,500. Divide by the number of units that were produced. Divide this by 14,000. We get to our total cost per unit as 41 rand 10 cents, and we divide here by 12,300 number of units that were produced. Then we say 342,500 divide by 12,300. We get 27 rand 85 cents. So this will be the total cost per unit for each of these products X and Y. 41 rand 10 cents, and here it will be 27 rand 85 cents. Now, one last way to calculate the cost per unit again. Cost per unit for both product X and Y. We can say joint cost per unit, meaning where we're calculating our joint cost per unit, and we just say 287,500, divide this by 14,000 units. We can do it in this way, very easy one, to calculate everything per unit. Now it will be 287,500, 287,500 divided by 14,000 units. If we do that, it gives us 20 rand 54 cents. For the second product, our joint cost, it is 162,500. It is 162,500 in total. We divide this by the number of units that were manufactured. Divide this by 12,300, because for this we produce 12.3 units. Then we say 162,500 divide by 12.3. we get 13 rand. We get 13 rand 21 cents. Then after we look for the further processing cost per unit. Our further processing cost, we know that it is 288,000 for product X. Divide this by 14,000. And for product Y, further processing cost, it is 180,000. Divide this by 12,300. You could have used the same method for the first calculation. Now, when we were allocating joint costs using the physical method, then we say 288,000 plus, divide by 14,000. We get 20 rand 57 cents, meaning our further processing cost will be 20 rand 57 cents. And for product Y, 180,000 divide by 12,300, we get to 14 rand 63 cents. So now we say 14.63 plus 13.21, we get 27.84, which is exactly the same as that 27.84 that we calculated previously. 27.85 rounding off difference, which is 85 rounding off difference. Then here we have 20.57 plus 20.54, it is 41.11. This is exactly the same, 41 rand 11 cents. So this is quite important to know how to calculate your cost per unit and also your total cost. In any of the format or ways it can be asked, please make sure that you are able to nail that question and master it very well. Now, remember I said you could have done the same thing in the previous method where you were required to calculate your joint costs using the physical method. So now that could have been another way you could have used. If you remember, the joint cost per unit for product X in the first question, it was 17 rand 11 cents. So now if you want, you could have taken the further processing cost that I've just calculated, because further processing cost does not change. Our further processing cost per unit, they are calculated as 20 rand 57 cents and 14 rand 60. So 20 rand 0.57 plus 17.11, we get to the same 37.68, which was our cost per unit that we calculated at the bottom. Just see that we calculated our cost per unit. It was made of the joint cost per unit and further processing cost per unit. So now you could have done the same thing. Joint cost 17.11, further processing cost 20.57 for product X, 36.78. And also this one, we can do the same thing. Our further processing cost per unit are 14 rand 63 cents, which is, because they don't change, 14.63 plus 17.11, we get to the 31.74. It's the same cost of 31.74 that we calculated in the first calculation, where the cost per unit was 31 rand. Just checking that one, 31.74. There we have it. So either way, guys, make sure that you are able to master this. Thank you very much. You've been wonderful listeners. God be with you.